He told me I was just a secretary in uniform, and the silence of a military cemetery swallowed me whole. The November air bit against my face as the bugle's last note faded into the pines. Rows of white stones gleamed under a pale sky, each one a name etched into silence. I stood at the edge of the canopy heels sinking in gravel, my dress blues pressed so stiff they cut my skin. In front, the flag-draped coffin rested between stone pillars. My mother deserved every stripe, every folded edge. I raised my hand, removed the insignia from my chest, and laid it on her casket as though it could speak all the words my throat refused. It was meant to be a quiet gesture. Instead, it became humiliation. Richard moved from the front row with the precision of a man who once commanded storms. His shoes struck gravel in clipped rhythm, his uniform bristling with ribbons polished brighter than his conscience. He did not bow his head. His hand went straight to the pin, lifted it like lint, and carried it 3 steps to the podium. The black trash can swallowed it with a metallic crack. The congregation shifted. A murmur spread. A gasp broke behind me. I did not move. My hands clenched until the stitching of my gloves cut into my palms. Valerie sat composed, veil-pinned lips curved in a faint smile. Marcus smirked, always the favored son. Ethan looked down at his shoes, unwilling to act. No one spoke. Richard's voice cut across the mourners, deliberate and cold. "You're nothing but a secretary in uniform." He wanted everyone to hear the honor guard, the priest cousin's neighbors. His verdict against my life delivered at my mother's grave. The priest clutched his book, fumbling for solemnity. The honor guard folded the flag with perfect corners, its weight passed into Richard's hands as if nothing had shattered. But it had. The ritual lay broken, and no one bent to mend it. I kept my eyes on the casket, on the white blooms my mother's friends had arranged. Not one mourner met my gaze. I was invisible in the uniform I had given years to, unseen even as service stripes gleamed under the dim sun. I thought of nights Mom had written me letters overseas, ending each with "proud of you." She had carried me in silence when no one else would. And now she lay beneath a flag handed to the man who erased me with a gesture. My breath caught, but no tears came. Rage was sharper than grief. The murmurs faded into a hush that demanded a choice. I gave him none. I stood still, salute sharp eyes dry, letting his words brand themselves into me. I could feel the weight of every stare, even when eyes slid away the moment I turned. Some guests pretended to cough, some adjusted coats, others whispered behind cupped hands as if gossip could mask complicity. The smell of damp earth mixed with the sweetness of fading lilies, a fragrance that clung to my throat heavier than old incense. I remembered standing as a child with a paper flag waiting for Richard to scoop me up, only to watch him stride past to salute another officer. The same lesson repeated: I was to be overlooked, useful only when silent. But standing at my mother's grave, I understood that silence had served him more than it had ever served me. That day, it truly ended. From this moment, I owe him no silence. They didn't just erase me from the funeral, they erased me from my mother's last words. The office smelled faintly of coffee gone cold and old leather files. Dust hovered in the slant of late afternoon light through Venetian blinds, striping the oak desk where Bennett Cole shuffled papers with the kind of solemn rhythm reserved for death. Outside, traffic hummed faintly, but in here the only sound was the shuffle of parchment and the muted tick of a clock that seemed too loud. I sat opposite him, dress uniform exchanged for civilian black. The stiffness of my collar still pressing against my throat as if the funeral hadn't ended. My hands rested on the notebook I carried everywhere, though my pen lay untouched, waiting. He cleared his throat and began to read. The estate of Eleanor Thorne, surviving spouse Richard Thorne, sons Marcus and Ethan Thorne. The words droned on a dry litany of possessions and allocations, none of which carried my name. Not the piano where Mom and I had played duets when I was 10. Not the journals she kept locked in a cedar chest. Not the silver locket she once pressed into my palm when I shipped out. Each item passed from her to them as if I had never existed. I stared at the papers, waiting for him to reach my name, some clause tucked at the end. It never came. When he finished, silence expanded between us. The blinds clattered slightly in the breeze, and still I said nothing. He fidgeted, fingers drumming against the folder. Finally, I asked, my voice steady, "Was there an earlier draft?" His eyes flicked up, then away. The pause was longer than the question deserved. He adjusted his glasses, the hesitation betraying him. "There was," he admitted softly, "but it was withdrawn." Withdrawn was a careful word, polished, safe. I pressed. "By whom?" His answer was a whisper, reluctant. "By direction." The words hung like smoke. My chest tightened, but my expression stayed composed. Through the glass wall behind him, I caught sight of movement in the lobby. Valerie stood there, her hands clasped loosely over her bag, posture impeccable. She wasn't supposed to be here yet. Here she was, presence, calculated, smile, faint as a veil. Her gaze met mine for a fraction of a second. She inclined her head, the gesture almost courteous. But the curve of her lips said otherwise, complicity disguised as civility. She knew. She had helped. And she wanted me to understand that nothing here was accidental. I turned back to Bennett. Withdrawn or destroyed? He shifted again, throat working. Papers shuffled through, there was nothing left to find. Finally, his shoulders sagged. Destroyed, he murmured, almost inaudible. I leaned forward, forcing him to look at me. On whose order? His voice cracked against the still air. Your father ordered, the earlier will destroyed. The sentence landed heavier than any insult at the graveside. It was not only my pin he had discarded. It was my mother's intent, her last attempt to put something of herself into my hands. Gone with a signature, gone with his command. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying the churn of rage. The piano, the journals, the locket, every promise erased as if I had never existed. Valerie's presence in the doorway was the final signature, her calmness, the ink. Bennett sat frozen, as though ashamed, though shame had come too late. I opened my notebook, pen scraping across the first blank line, words steady, deliberate as if carved instead of written. The silence of that office cut so still, deeper than the cemetery. They erased me. Now I will write myself back. At 8 years old, I waved my paper flag, waiting for him to scoop me up. Instead, he saluted someone else. The memory comes back in color, sharper than any photograph. The tarmac shimmered under Alabama heat, brass band blaring as families waved in frantic rhythm. My paper flag bled red and blue ink onto my sweaty fingers. I stretched my arm as far as it would reach, convinced he would see me, convinced that homecoming meant recognition. Richard strode past, chest-wide, medals, glinting eyes locked not on me, but on the commander waiting at the edge of the crowd. His salute snapped, crisp, practiced, perfect. Behind him, Marcus ran forward. Ethan clung to Eleanor's skirt, and I stood still, flag limp, invisible, even under the boiling sun. The shadow of his back swallowed me whole. That night, I asked why. Eleanor tucked me in, whispering words shaped more by fear than comfort. Don't challenge him in public. Be patient. She smoothed my hair and smiled as though belief alone could erase the sting. I swallowed it, believing patience could buy love, believing silence might earn respect. Instead, it built walls so high I forgot how to climb them. Now, decades later, I sat in a motel room off the bypass carpet, the color of stale wine lamp, buzzing with weak light. My blouse lay on the chair, ribbons lined like fragile proof that my years meant more than secretarial shorthand. I traced each strip of fabric with a trembling finger, mouthing campaigns I could not speak, of choices I had lived with. They call me secretary, I whispered to the empty room. The record calls me strategist. The words cracked in my throat, half prayer, half plea. The tears I had denied at the funeral finally came here. Silent streaks carving down my face, hot enough to burn. Rage followed close behind, fists beating once against the mattress before falling useless at my side. Silence thickened, pressing on the walls until even the ticking of the bathroom fan seemed to mock me. I thought of the piano denied to me, the locket erased from record, the mother who had seen me but could not protect me. The weight of erasure threatened to crush my chest. I let it for a moment. I let myself fold shoulders, shaking throat raw from words unsaid. It was collapse, but private, and in its hollow I felt something harder than grief stir. Memories sharpened, cutting through, self-pity convoys rerouted because of me. Lives uncounted, saved in silence, ribbons no one in that family would ever comprehend. The collapse stopped at the edge of despair and crystallized into something else, resolve, rising quiet as dawn. The motel smelled of detergent and damp curtains, a nowhere place meant for passing through. Yet here, I chose not to pass. Here, I chose to begin. I wiped my face, drew in breath, steady enough to hold a pen. The notebook opened under my hand, blank page, waiting. I wrote a single word across the top: legacy. My chest steadied with the ink. I was still here, still fighting, still writing myself in. I stared at the ceiling's water stain. The hum of trucks seeped into the walls, reminding me how lives moved forward while mine stayed trapped. I thought of ironing Marcus's ROTC uniform, of Ethan boasting about service never finished, of Eleanor folding her hopes each year to fit his. The ache pressed harder. Yet under it was defiance, an ember refusing to die. I whispered, steady now. Patience is over. Phone buzzes, Colonel Linda Evans. You ready? I have an opportunity. In the military, allies aren't drinking buddies. They're the ones who will sign affidavits when the truth needs teeth. Fort Myers corridors held a specific quiet born of polished floors and carried secrets. In my office, blinds sliced winter light into bars over folders bearing my mother's name. Colonel Linda Evans stood behind the chair, reading without touching. Go public, she said. Let the story breathe. Timing matters, I answered. Her jaw set. He threw your insignia away and cut you from a will. If you wait for permission to exist, you won't. I'm not waiting. I'm choosing the ground. I slid copies of hospice logs, VA forms, receipt scans. He built a parade. I'll dismantle it with paperwork. She nodded once. You'll need witnesses. I have one. We met at a cafe near the Pentagon, strong coffee, low voices. Master Sergeant Yara Whitfield arrived in a plain jacket, eyes alert, as if the map were still spread. We hugged once and sat with our backs to the wall. Mosul, she said. I nodded. The convoy reroute. You saw the pattern first, she said. You tapped the river bend. We adjusted. 20 soldiers kept breathing. She stirred sugar she didn't need. Tell me what you need now. I laid out the pieces: Richard's public slight, the erased will the clerk's direction, the upcoming forensic review. Then Marcus, the disability percentage, the gym under another LLC, the marathon photos against his claim. Yara listened like we used to listen to radio chatter, hunting for the thread that unravels lies. Dual axis, she said. Estate and VA. Make them reinforce each other so no one calls it personal. We divided tasks. I'd compile hospice documents and request certified copies of every will revision. She'd draft a recollection from Mosul Date's unit's chain of command, so my record couldn't be minimized. She'd also call an old medic from my mother's last month, the one who kept everything. Back at Fort Myer, I cleared the desk like a runway. Dividers read, Will Hospice VA Media. I scanned, renamed, and stacked until the titles formed a single-line promise erasure proof. The printer warmed my hands with affidavits and requests. I built a timeline that would survive cross-examination and cynicism. Dusk. Yara called. Memo written, she said. Unit grid time, reroute the report that never rose because egos liked cleaner stories. And the medic. Her garage is an archive. She paused. If you need testimony, I'll be there. They won't erase you again. I sat still as the office shifted from gray to blue. Allies in the open are fine. Allies in the shadows move the world a quarter inch at a time. I dated the notes, filed Yara's memo, flagged the county requests, and wrote my smaller vow in the notebook: choose the ground and the hour. Not his. Never again. Evans texted, patience is a tactic, not a personality. Back at my desk, I labeled folders until their names spoke. I cross-referenced hospice calls, drafted clerk questions with no exits, and listed Marcus's race bibs against his claimed incapacity dates. Not glamorous, granular. Every dot would have a line and a destination. When doubt nipped, I pictured the river bend the map's frayed edge under my hand, the quiet before a decision saves lives. Two fronts, law and service, align. Email arrives. File attached, Marcus Thorne disability claim. Paper doesn't lie, but ink does, and ink leaves, smudges. The county clerk's office smelled of old toner and dust. Faded flags leaned in the corners, file cabinets lined the walls like upright coffins, and a single ceiling fan turned slow circles that moved the air, but not the weight pressing on my chest. I signed the logbook with a hand steadier than I felt. The clerk, a woman with gray hair pinned tight, disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she carried a folder thicker than expected. My name, Thorne, was penciled in the corner. She slid a copy across the desk. The date at the top caught my eye, first 5 years earlier. The names listed in Eleanor's own hand, my piano, her journals, the locket. There it was, the legacy she had promised, preserved not in memory, but in pen strokes that leaned left the way hers always did. My throat tightened. For a moment I saw her sitting at the kitchen table late at night, pen scratching against paper as if writing was the only weapon she was allowed. The clerk tapped the page softly. You should know, she said, this version was pulled from record by direct instruction. I didn't need to ask whose. Then came the second file. The new will, the one read aloud after the funeral, stripped of my name. My eyes landed on the notary's signature. It looked real ink, bold and deliberate. But at the bottom was a date 2 years ago. The clerk leaned closer, voice low. That notary passed away 3 years before this was signed. Ink lies. Ink smudges. Paper records what is given, but ink betrays its own fraud. I folded the copies, carefully sliding them into my binder, the evidence no one could laugh away. As I walked out, the ceiling fan kept turning in slow denial, but the ground beneath me had shifted. This was no longer family politics. It was crime. Back in the motel, the lamp on the desk glowed weak and yellow, casting light across documents stacked like soldiers waiting inspection. I opened the file. Marcus had never expected anyone to check his disability claim. The numbers were neat, precise, insisting he was too impaired to walk unassisted, his percentage listed as near total. But on the screen of my laptop, his public marathon photos bloomed in sequence, bib number sharp against his chest, finish times faster than mine on a good day. One image caught him grinning at the line, arms raised, muscles flexed. Fraud doesn't sweat, but runners do. I printed side-by-side claim forms versus photographs. The contrast was obscene, ink insisting on fragility, while pixels shouted endurance. My pen underlined the dates, connecting the lie in thick strokes. I thought of Eleanor's careful letters, how ink in her hand had always meant truth. Here ink meant theft. Theft of money, theft of honor, theft of every sacrifice she made, believing her family's name still carried weight. I whispered it aloud to the motel walls. Not just injustice. Fraud. The words steadied me, turned grief into focus. This wasn't about being cut from a table setting or a printed obituary. This was about law, about record, about proof no one could burn away. I stacked the copies into labeled sections, my own campaign file, every sheet around in the magazine I would carry forward. The motel curtains hung thin with faded flowers. Streetlight cut the room into stripes. Each car that slowed outside spiked my pulse as if Richard might storm in for the files. But he wasn't here. Only the fridge's hum, the scratch of my pen, and the proof that shadows weighed less than paper. I noted notary dead clear claim photos saved. Each mark was a nail in their denial. They thought erasure would end me. Instead, it clarified me. Text message from unknown number. If you want the truth about Richard Thorne, I have a 1993 video. The truth doesn't age. It just waits for the right hand to press play. Rain slicked the asphalt outside the roadside diner, the neon sign buzzing blue against the wet glass. Trucks growled past on the highway taillights smeared red through the storm. I slid into a corner booth back to the walleyes on the door. Yara arrived first, shaking water from her jacket, scanning the room the way we always did. Downrange, note the exits, mark the shadows. She gave me a nod. Back up as promised. Minutes later, Corporal Rowan Ortega appeared. Age had settled in his shoulders, but his eyes were sharp, carrying the weight of things unsaid for decades. He didn't order coffee. He just reached into his jacket and placed a small USB drive on the table. It looked harmless, but the way his fingers lingered told me it had burned him for years. That's the copy, he said. Kept it buried in a box of cassettes so nobody would find it. I slid it toward my laptop, heart quick. The screen lit our faces in pale glow. Ortega leaned closer as the file opened grainy footage timestamped 1993. The frame shook a handheld camcorder catching a briefing tent in desert dust. A map spread across the table. A young officer pointed to a ridge explaining an alternate flank route. His voice carried conviction, the kind born from ground truth. Then Richard entered the frame. He stood taller, cut the younger man off, and repeated the same plan, word for word. Around the table, senior brass nodded, pens scratching. The camera caught the younger officer's silence, the kind that swallows a career before it begins. I felt bile rise. Proof of theft, not just of inheritance or dignity, but of honor that shaped lives. Ortega's whisper cut the static. That officer was my friend. He died in training the next year. Richard made sure no report carried his name. I hit record on my phone, laying it beside the USB. Tell it clean, I said. Ortega's straightened voice gravel, but steady. He laid out the date, the operation, the name of the officer erased. Yara leaned forward, filling in chain of command names of battalions, confirming detail by detail, so no one could call it memory's trick. I wrote each fact into my notebook, the ink steady now, not smudging. Then Ortega's voice dropped. He told me once, the truth has no rank. Then he shredded my report. Silence held us, broken only by the neon buzz and rain drumming the windows. I closed the laptop, slid the USB into a case, and gripped it like a weapon finally made visible. The truth had been waiting 3 decades for the right hand. Now it was mine. The waitress refilled mugs without asking, her eyes sliding past as if sensing the gravity on our table. Ortega rubbed his palms, skin-rough nails bitten. I kept thinking someone else would expose him, he said. But the years passed and silence grew heavier than any rucksack. His words were release, not pity. Yara kept her gaze on the door, shoulders squared, a silent guard while I gathered facts. Ortega's jaw twitched at Richard's name. He hadn't just kept a tape. He had kept a wound. My binder at my side was thick with wills and contradictions. This USB would be its spine. For a moment, I pictured Richard on a podium, metals polished, preaching sacrifice. Beneath that shine lay this grainy rot. Every lie has a timestamp. Every theft leaves a witness. Now I had both. The rain eased, rivulets racing down the glass. The neon flickered, half letters dark. I closed my notebook, tucked the USB, and met Ortega's tired eyes. You carried this alone too long, I said. He nodded, lighter at last. Yara tapped the table, once assurance that we were 3, now, not 1. In that booth, the past wasn't buried, it sat between us, waiting still. My phone rings. Colonel Evans. Nadine, you've been nominated to speak at the Women in Tactical Intelligence event in Atlanta. Next week. Paper speaks louder than metals when science holds the microphone. Dr. Priya Patel's office smelled of acetone and paper dust. Microscopes crowded her desk, their lenses tilted toward a set of enlarged scans pinned under glass. She gestured for me to sit, her expression professional but heavy. "I've compared the documents you sent." She began, her voice low. Under the light, Eleanor's signature in the older will flowed natural pressure lines rising and falling like a pulse. In the newer will, the strokes froze uniform mechanical, lacking the tremor of human touch. "This," Dr. Patel said, sliding her finger over the page, "is a traced overlay. Someone copied her hand. They even reused a seal that had expired years earlier." The words should have broken me, but instead they steadied me. Proof cold, clinical, undeniable. I leaned closer, noting the microscope image ink pooled oddly at the curves, as though dragged rather than written. A photograph of Eleanor's authentic letters sat beside it, graceful even in their imperfections. The contrast was damning. Dr. Patel pressed a stamp onto her report, the sound sharp as a gavel. "This document is scientifically impossible. Bennett Cole." My attorney paced at the edge of the room, already dictating notes into his recorder. "We'll file an injunction immediately. Estate assets will freeze until the court hears this." His words cut through the clinical air with the weight of strategy. For the first time since the funeral, I felt law shifting in my favor. Later in Bennett's office, a laptop screen glowed with the faces of Ms. Lang and her VA OIG team. Their voices came clipped through the speaker. "We've reviewed Marcus Thorne's claim history," Lang said. "His declared impairments contradict multiple business filings. He owns a CrossFit gym. Tax records show full operational control. Photographs place him competing in marathons during the same period he claimed total disability." The word fraud wasn't spoken, but it pressed against every syllable. I listened, jaw tight, as Bennett typed notes rapid fire. He asked the investigators to prepare affidavits, each line a new nail driven into Marcus's shield of entitlement. The VA officials promised coordination with federal counsel. "His case will escalate," Lang concluded. "But we'll need your documentation as corroboration." I nodded, already scanning my binder, already marking the tabs that matched their dates. When the call ended, silence lingered. I touched the edges of Dr. Patel's report smooth against my fingertips, a weapon sharpened not by rage, but by science. My mother's handwriting, my brother's false claims, their lies could no longer hide under family names or medals polished for parades. Paper was louder now. Dr. Patel invited me behind the scope. Authentic ink bled into fibers. The forgery sat harsh edges too crisp. She pointed to stutters no hand of my mother's ever made. My throat tightened. Eleanor had written lullabies with that hand. Now her name was stolen. Bennett spread files tabs marking motions. "We'll combine this with Ortega's testimony and the VA contradictions. The judge won't ignore the pattern." His voice steadied me. For years I had fought wars with maps. Now the battlefield was law. On the call, Ms. Lang added, "Fraudulent claims don't just steal money, they steal from veterans waiting for care." Marcus hadn't just betrayed me, he had stolen space meant for the wounded. I thought of Eleanor's patience, and rage sharpened into resolve. He would answer. That night I stacked Patel's report beside Lang's files binder, heavy with each edition. Outside, the city hummed, but inside felt like a verdict. Each document became ammunition. Unlike Richard's theatrics or Marcus's bravado, paper did not blink. Science was on my side. Marcus texts me, "You're not in my league. Let's see you handle me on live TV." I didn't need my name in their family tree tonight, the lights spelled it out anyway. Downtown Atlanta blazed with banners, the convention hall lit like a cathedral of steel and glass. Veterans in pressed uniforms, officials in tailored suits, families clutching programs, every seat was filled. I stood in the wings, adjusting the collar of my dress blues, my palms damp, despite years of deployments and briefings. Colonel Evans brushed past me, a steady hand on my shoulder. "You've faced worse," she murmured. She was right, but tonight was different. Tonight the battle was not in desert dust or command centers, it was in sight of the man who had erased me. When my name was called, applause thundered. The hall seemed to tilt toward me as I crossed the stage steps, measured gaze forward. And there he was, Richard Thorne, third row, medals bright on his chest. His jaw locked, eyes wide, as if the years of silencing me were unraveling in one spotlight. Valerie sat stiff beside him, a mask of polite disbelief. Ethan's gaze skittered away, unable to meet mine. The applause did not falter. For the first time, their silence was not my prison, it was their shame. I took the certificate, shook the general's hand, and stood tall under the lights. Cameras clicked, flashes biting. My throat tightened, but my voice held when I spoke into the mic. Quiet service is still service. Some of us don't march in parades. We count convoys, we analyze patterns, we reroute lives away from danger. The work isn't loud, but it matters. A murmur rippled then, a wave of clapping, as though my words touched something long ignored. From the corner of my eye, I saw Richard flinch. He, who had measured worth only in noise, now sat in silence while the hall recognized me. Evans gave a curt nod from the side, pride hidden but unmistakable. Backstage, Avery Quinn intercepted me. Notebook in one hand, recorder in the other, her eyes alive with questions. "Why wasn't your name listed on Colonel Thorne's family bio yesterday?" she asked, sharp but not unkind. The question cut deeper than any insult. I steadied myself, replying evenly, "You'll have to ask him. I've been serving for years." She scribbled furiously, gaze flicking between my uniform and my face. "You're the story no one printed," she whispered. "Until now." As I returned to the main floor for closing honors, the final anthem rose. I lifted my hand in salute, not to Richard, who sat frozen, but to the flag above us, colors bright in the rafters. The crowd surged to its feet, applause rolling like thunder. My salute was steady, a vow. Richard's hand stayed clasped in his lap. Flags lined the walls, the air heavy with memory. Young servicewomen watched, eyes bright, waiting for someone to admit what they knew: invisibility isn't weakness. I thought of Eleanor, her patience, the piano she never played. I carried her in every word. Guests clustered, but I moved quietly. Some nodded, others whispered my name. Richard did not approach. He stayed seated. Valerie's lips pressed thin. Ethan stared at his phone. Their isolation was louder than speech. Avery stopped me at the exit. "They'll spin this," she said. "But you deserve the first telling." She tapped her notebook. "This isn't scandal, it's truth denied." I nodded. "Then print it," I said. Her smile was fierce. "Tomorrow people will know." Later in my room, I watched headlights blur. My phone pinged, the DoD post climbing. One line made me pause. "Service isn't measured by noise, but by consequence." I closed my eyes, letting it root deeper than the insult haunting me. The record was public. Silence worked in my favor. It was his silence, not mine. DoD posts my profile online that night. Avery promises tomorrow, the story runs, the daughter they erased. If her silence could shake a hall of generals, imagine what comes next. Subscribe now so you don't miss the chapter where the truth finally brings her family to its knees. After the applause faded, what echoed was the link shared 1,000 times over. By morning, the hall's roar was a ghost against the glow of my phone. Avery's feature posted at dawn, headline, "The daughter they erased." The photo showed me saluting. Within an hour, I trended. By noon, Shah erased. No more jumped to morning shows. Notifications surged, gratitude mixed with doubt. The story left my hands. The power thrilled and chilled me. I perched on the bed, scrolling while the feed refreshed faster than breath. For years, silence was armor. Exposure felt like a firing lane without plates. Avery's line looped. Her father erased her. The record did not. Clean, brutal, true, and noisy. She called mid-morning. "It's wildfire," she said. "Brace some accounts call you ungrateful." I'd seen it praise venom conspiracy. "Send more documentation," she added. "We'll keep it honest." I promised a packet. Bennett rang. VA OIG issued subpoenas at 9:12, he said. Marcus's medical file, gym contracts, bank statements. The docket leaked, cameras circling. A meme already showed Marcus finishing a marathon beside the word disabled. Vindication tugged. Dread won. He would thrash. Richard would counter. My cousin Serena called. "People are whispering about the will about your father," she said. "At the VFW, the bakery. If he erased you in print, what else did he fix?" I pictured porches and pews, the slow turn of a small town. "He's losing them," she added. "Be careful, they still fear him." Afterward, the room felt too large. What if the crowd turns on me again? Tides flip. Sympathy curdles into spectacle. My ribbons lay folded on the chair, Bronze Star Commendations Joint Ops. Proof lived there, but his graveside sentence ticked on, just a secretary in uniform. I breathed until it dimmed. Near evening, Richard released a statement any omissions were unintentional. "I'm proud of my family's legacy." Unintentional. I opened my archives and pulled the Navy promotion email subject promotion announcement Lieutenant Commander Nadine Thorne. At the bottom sat the receipt opened by Richard Thorne, June 14, 2022. He had known and chosen erasure. I forwarded the screenshot to Avery with one word: verify. Her reply was fast, metadata confirmed, counsel cleared. Minutes later, her update posted setting his denial against the timestamp. Bennett texted, "This moves it from family dispute to willful misrepresentation." Support arrived from women I'd never met: analysts, medics, logisticians, each note a stitch into a wider fabric. Between them ran cautions: "Be careful. They play dirty." I brewed bad coffee and watched rain stripe the glass. "Keep breathing, keep labeling, keep receipts," I told myself. A secure VA note arrived: deadlines, custodian contacts, a request for my timeline. Ms. Lang signed it. She didn't write fraud, she didn't need to. I answered with numbered attachments: Ortega's tape summary, Patel's report, hospice logs, a grid matching Marcus's race bibs to claimed incapacity dates. Fatigue hit like turbulence. "What if exposure drags me under?" I asked. The phone answered. Avery sent a proof. Serena, a prayer. A stranger, a photo of her mother in uniform with the caption, "Thank you for saying what we lived." At 7:43 p.m., Richard went on Cable Metal's lit voice smooth. He repeated the unintentional line. I reopened the email, stared at the stamp of opened until my pulse steadied, then sent Avery the final confirmation. Her update landed, comments tilted. Under his story, the floor moved. Bennett called, tone sharpened. "The judge reviewed our filings alongside the expert report," he said. "We have movement." My heart climbed. Define movement. I said, "One boot already hunting the floor." Court sets emergency hearing date Friday. Every document I filed was a hook, and tonight, one more baited the trap. Bennett's office hummed with printers. Boxes of discovery stood open. Red gold tabs marked the arteries we'd follow. He slid a stack toward me. "Subpoenas are finalized: seal registry, notary journals, clerk access logs, funeral home chain of custody, bank records." He tapped the top page. "We serve at opening. No time to misplace the past." I nodded. Patel's report. Ortega's tape, the VA grid coordinates converging. "Tomorrow isn't a victory lap," Bennett said. "It's a runway. Let the paper speak." We rehearsed foundation, authentication, anomalies, motive. Facts, first feelings, last, he warned. "If they drag you into biography, return to evidence." 2 blocks away, the hall was alive. Crews rigged truss-tested mics. Richard's headshot glinted. "Yara met me at the wings." "Crowds are weather. she said. Documentation stays. We walked the perimeter counting exits. Backstage placards lay face up thorn, and 2 seats away a blank, for an honored guest. Ready if he spins, she asked. I'm not here to outshout him, I said. I'm here to outrecord him. Evans arrived crisp as a verdict scanning stage and green room lock. Morning is the hearing, afternoon his panel. Her gaze held. Don't chase applause, chase precision. We mapped contingencies, invoke service, cite the commendation. Feign surprise, cite the read receipt. Dismiss Ortega, cite custody chain. Evans sketched a battle rhythm and a minimalist statement for Avery. No ad-libbing. Dusk turned the windows violet. I walked back to the hotel. The lobby glared. The clerk slid an unmarked envelope across the marble. This was left for you. In the elevator, I opened it. The pin lay in my palm, polished, the same insignia he'd dropped into a trash can. A line beneath it. Talk R. I stood still as the cab climbed, metal cooler than memory, warmer than rage. In my room, I placed the pin beside Patel's report and the printout opened by Richard Thorne, June 14, 2022. Evidence and admission. I pictured him dictating the note, substituting symbol for apology. Evans called. You received it? She said. He's rattled. I described the polish, the nameless envelope. Good, she said. Let him blink. Don't meet him. We don't negotiate a narrative mid-flight. I set the pin on hotel stationery and watched it refuse to roll. Morning lined up Bailiff Bennett's foundation, Patel's slides, clerk logs, the judge, then microphones. Yara texted steady. I drafted a spare statement, dates, sources, then cut it. If Avery found me, she'd get facts, not fire. The freeway glowed beyond the glass. My breath fogged a pale circle where the crest touched it. I arrayed tomorrow's kit IDs, exhibits, 2 pens, a backup tie, clerk copies, and the pin centered. I thought of Eleanor guiding my fingers to middle C, how often she kept time while others took bows. In the mirror, I saw both of them and neither. I slid the pin back into the envelope and tucked it under Patel's report. If it was bait, I wouldn't bite. If apology, it could live among evidence it couldn't erase. Calendar alert. Hearing 0900. Panel 1400. The screen went dark. The pin a small eclipse. Somewhere he was awake, calculating angles under metals that can't outlast time. I killed the lamp, then snapped it on one last check. The envelope waited like a sealed question. I pressed the flap without licking it, the way you do when you expect another edit. I sat on the bed and let the silence belong to itself. The pin had come back to me. I wasn't going back to the girl who needed it for permission. Morning would ask for posture, afternoon for poise. The record would work without his microphone. I opened my case, slid the envelope to the back, and latched it. The click felt final. I looked once more at the crest, proof that polish isn't penance, and closed the lid. I whisper, I don't need it back. I need history corrected. They read me out of the obituary today. The judge read my name into the record. Fulton County Courthouse smelled of varnish and old paper. Rose filled early press veterans' neighbors. I sat with Bennett, palms on the folder, holding my mother's letter. Across the aisle, Richard sat with a gray-suited lawyer. Marcus leaned back. Ethan stared at the floor. Valerie dabbed lipstick with a tissue and refused to meet my eyes. The clerk called the case. The judge invited openings. Bennett rose. He mapped our spine, a will corrupted by fraud, a notary who could not sign a chain of custody contradicting itself. He did not mention the obituary. Its absence was a chair. Dr. Priya Patel took the stand with quiet authority. On the screen, Eleanor's genuine signature fluid rising beside the newer one, halting uniform. The seal, she said, tapping, is a reused imprint. Microscopic scratches match a device retired before the alleged date. The signature is a copy stabilized by tracing. Richard's attorney tried doubt. Could stress alter a hand? Stress changes speed and pressure variability, Patel replied. Here variability is missing. This is not stress. This is simulation. The words stayed. Valerie swallowed. Sweat gathered at her lip. The county records clerk followed. Calm. Under oath, she confirmed the notary on the new will had died 3 years before the supposed signing. Gasps broke, then receded under the judge's lifted hand. Obituary and probate filings confirm, she said. Her voice did not tremble. Bennett projected the witness page. 2 signatures beneath the forgery, a distant cousin's and Valerie Thorne. Breath paused. Valerie's eyes skittered to Richard, then down. The tissue took her lipstick like a pressed leaf. Objection for relevance. Overruled. Richard stared at nothing as if stillness might change anything. Marcus whispered behind his knuckles. I kept my palms flat. Let the record speak. Cross came with knives wrapped as questions. Commander Thorne, Richard's lawyer, asked, Do you resent your stepmother? Objection, character, Bennett said. Sustained. Did you misremember your mother's intentions, he said. Memory is subjective, I said. Handwriting analysis is not. Bennett moved to admit the hospice log calls placed my number listed as primary. He traced custody for the original will, then the gap the day it vanished. We do not allege every answer today, he said, only what is knowable that the instrument offered as her will could not have been made when and how it is claimed. A veteran coughed into his fist. The other side sought a recess. Denied. Even if there were inconsistencies, Colonel Thorne believed, the attorney began. Beliefs are not before me, the judge said. Documents are. Paper, not belief. Valerie's name returned by stipulation. The clerk read her attestation. Witness affirms presence of notary and signatory. We sat with the fact the notary was dead. A bead of sweat slid along her hairline and hung on the pearl at her ear. Pens clicked. The air held heat and light. The judge asked if there was anything further. Bennett glanced at me. We had promised paper. Some things require a voice. I stood. I opened the folder and lifted Eleanor's letter, ink softened but unafraid. This is my mother's hand. That other document is a lie. Silence pressed. Richard watched me like a map folded wrong, now refusing to lie flat. Marcus's smirk thinned. Valerie looked only at the ruined tissue. Closing was brief. Bennett requested provisional relief. Restore the original will pending trial to prevent irreparable harm. Opposing counsel offered misunderstandings, grief, family complexity. The judge listened, expression flat. The room held its breath. I remembered the cemetery, the flag, the trash can. I remembered Eleanor's piano middle C steadying me. I remembered the messages from women filed under silence. Dates do not tremble, the clerk had said. The thought steadied me. The judge spoke. This matter will be tried. Paper rustled. I centered my breath. Justice walks with a limp. Even a step can change the climate of a family room. Judge rules original will provisionally reinstated pending trial. Morning, the gavel named me, daughter. Afternoon, my father preached about legacy. The ink on the mourning order still felt warm as I slipped into the convention center. Cameras clustered, badges flashed, carpet swallowed noise. I kept to side corridors, dress blues precise, a pass, clipped low. No entourage, no statement, just presence. Inside banners rose building leadership across generations. Richard's face filled the program. Marcus and Ethan sat beside him. Valerie hovered 2 rows back. I took the last row aisle seat. Across from me, Avery slid in, tapping her pen. The moderator hymned legacy. Richard stepped forward. Baritone, steady discipline, sacrifice, continuity. 3 generations of Thorne men in service, he said, letting men dangle. Avery's hand rose as applause thinned. Avery Quinn, Herald Ledger. What about Lieutenant Commander Nadine Thorne? The lights rearranged themselves on his face. Any prior omission was a clerical oversight, he said. Clerical oversight scraped across Patel's slides and the county ledger. Valerie stiffened. Marcus sat forward. The moderator tried to glide. "Let's return to one follow-up," Avery said. "If a notary died 3 years before a signature date, is that oversight too?" Cameras tilted. Richard's tongue pressed a molar of family tell. "This is not a courtroom," he said, command threading his mic. "We're here to discuss principles." Principles had been my cage. I smoothed my skirt and felt the folded order in my pocket like a pulse. A cadet glanced back. I nodded. "Wait." Richard told a parable a recruit mistook quiet for weakness. Leadership required volume. "Legacy isn't given," he finished. "It's earned and it's guarded." Paper could have been enough, but this hall had rehearsed my erasure for years. Some rooms require a body to speak. I stepped into the aisle. Avery's recorder clicked. Richard's chin jerked brief surprise. "It wasn't oversight," I said. "It was erasure." The words landed. Heads turned like grass. A retired chief cupped his ear, then nodded. Richard gripped the lectern. "Lieutenant Commander, this forum is public," I said. "So is the obituary." A ripple moved. "Decorum," the moderator warned. Avery stood McLive. "Colonel Thorne, you called omissions unintentional. We have documentation that you opened her promotion notice on June 14, 2022. Is that still oversight?" Cameras reddened. Valerie's pearls rose and fell. His mouth tightened. "There are complexities you don't understand." "Families are complicated," I said, "and still accountable." I didn't approach. Distance was the point. Marcus leaned to his mic. "This is a leadership panel, not a trial." Ethan stared ahead. Time thickened. I thought of Eleanor's middle C. "Service isn't measured by noise," I said to the cadets. "It's measured by consequence." The back rows hummed. Richard tried to end it. "We honor all who serve." Avery pressed. "Name her." I didn't blink. The air pressed heavier at the podium than in the cheap seats. He looked down at a card, then up, seeking a rope. His eyes met mine and slid away. "This conversation should happen privately," he said. I let the quiet show its teeth. "Privacy ended when my name was removed," I said exact. I stayed in the aisle so cameras could frame the space between us as the argument. A woman in a wheelchair with a Vietnam Nurse Corps pin raised her hand. "Sir," she told Richard, "many of us served quietly. When our names disappear, it's on purpose." A young ensign in dress white stood next. "Ma'am," he said to me, voice cracking, "thank you." Avery's eyes shone. The story was writing itself from floor to dais. Reporters swiveled headsets on. A camera jib dipped and rose. Somewhere near the stage, a producer's hand hovered over cut and fell away. The order in my pocket was ballast. He had preached legacy. The room listened to lineage. I thought of daughters told to clap from doorways of a trash can by a flag of a pin that returned like a witness. I lowered my chin and said nothing more. The hall did the rest. For once, silence didn't belong to me. Veterans in uniform stand applauding while Richard freezes at the podium. They claimed disability, yet the cameras showed him sprinting across finish lines. The VA OIG hearing room was cold. Twin screens faced rows. Press badges bobbed. Bennett sat at my left, legal pad open. Ms. Lang stood at the podium, posture spare, voice level. Marcus arrived late, jaw set, choosing an aisle seat to give cameras a lane. "This is an administrative proceeding," Ms. Lang said, to review the basis for Mr. Thorne's disability benefits. The first video cued Marcus in his gym, chalk dust blooming as he snapped a deadlift, straight back plates groaning. On the second screen, a date stamp 6 weeks after a claim of debilitating pain. The bar kissed the floor and rose again. Pens paused, then moved. Okay, clip 2. Marcus coaching sled pushes, jogging, clapping, correcting form. Clip 3. A finish line photo bib, bright time visible, stride clean. Ms. Lang noted sources, public posts, warrant subpoenas. Bennett underlined dates. Marcus's profile twitched. "I trained to ease the pain," he said loud enough for the back row. "Therapy, not performance." The next clip answered a 315-pound back squat, then 2 more reps for the camera. On the adjacent screen, bank statements scrolled memberships, coaching fees, sponsorships. The ledger marched through months he called disabled. Operation Summary Ownership Papers for Thorn Strength LLC Leases Equipment Invoices Payroll. "You certified," Ms. Lang said, "that you could not perform substantial gainful activity. And yet, you did." A podium photo flashed metal ribbon, bright timestamp overlapping a medical form claiming limited mobility. "Good and bad days," his attorney said. Ms. Lang nodded. "We reviewed that. The pattern shows continuous high-intensity exertion and remunerated coaching. Filings show income not reported on annual forms." The words were heavier than anger. "Witch hunt," Marcus barked. His voice cracked on Hunt. Mike's leaned. I remembered his boasts that he was owed for the name that pain paid when pictured. The screens did not remember. They recorded. The chair asked 3-1 ownership structure. Ms. Lang read the articles. 2 reconcile claimed limitations with video. A medical line cannot lift over 20 pounds. The deadlift replayed without shame. 3 omission of income. The bank ledger filled the screen like a floodplain. "They're building mens rea," Bennett whispered. I nodded. Behind me, Avery's pen stitched. The story found its spine. Marcus rose and pointed. "You don't know what it's like? Sleepless nights, nerve pain, anxiety." Ms. Lang didn't disagree. "We don't adjudicate feelings," she said. "We reconcile statements with conduct and compensation." The sentence fell like a weight. A slide mapped rosters to timestamps, then pinned posts to entries. Story gave way to sequence. His shoulders tightened, then sagged. Pride is heavy until proof is heavier. The chair invited testimony. Ms. Lang looked to me an opening. I stood to meet the panel's eyes. I did not list my service, his taunts, or the years he used our name as a discount code. I gave a single line, not for drama, but for record. "You stole from the wounded to feed your pride." The words stayed where I put them. Something left his face, an easy mask. "I earned everything," he said, softer now, without the echo he expected. The clips kept looping, indifferent to lineage. Questions closed. The chair conferred with 2 colleagues. Ms. Lang capped her pen. Bennett exhaled. Outside chatter rose, tripods, producers counting. Inside the room made the silence before a gavel, airtight, shoulders drawn. Panel declares, benefits suspended. Fraud investigation opened. Statues don't shatter by hammer, they crumble by broadcast. The newsroom smelled of coffee. Monitors turned rumor to record. Avery stood under cool lights. I watched from a side bench, blazer now rulings and OIG echoes still in my chest. Countdown 3. 2. 1. The Tonight Avery said we examine a claim of legacy and the documents that contradict it. Parade photos, clipped headlines, a frieze of Richard. Kyron Thorne under review. Rowan Ortega appeared older, steady. He repeated calmly 1993, a junior officer's plan. A debrief where Richard took credit. A report that vanished. The tape played grainy, time-stamped. Richard gestured at a map. Another officer leaned. Ortega's jaw tightened. Posture told what Mike's missed. Avery threaded images to affidavits and logs. Multiple sources confirm the plan attributed to Colonel Thorne originated elsewhere. A split screen paired that room with a recent clip of Richard retelling it as if he alone had bled it. Corroboration, a logistics officer remembered the author. A memo matched Ortega's dates. An analyst explained stakes routes, altered exposure, reduced lives saved. Ortega looked into the lens. That maneuver saved lives, he said. It wasn't his. Cut to courthouse steps. Richard walked into microphones and said nothing. Metals dulled. Valerie hovered. Marcus stayed off camera. Ethan vanished. Chiron subpoena issued. Scope expands. No comment. My phone filled cadets, retirees, women once, footnotes finally. I see you. Avery closed dates, custody, provenance. She didn't say thief. Back on camera, she faced the audience. This is a developing investigation, she said. We will continue to report. I stepped into a hallway where quiet hummed low. On a monitor, Richard reappeared, smaller, swarmed. A veteran in a worn cap saluted the lens, not the man. I pressed my palms to a steel table and let it wick heat. Group chat lit. Yara mess halls buzzing. Evans, hold your line. Bennett discovery tonight. Ready by morning. I nodded. Part of me remembered 8 with a paper flag, part the coffin and the pin. The rest counted facts. On air again, archival clips of commendations from that period. A watchdog attorney explained how awards are revisited when fraud enters the record. Control paired that with stills of Eleanor's drawer-kept letter, its slant, alive syntax hers. I felt the cut. Outside a sports bar replayed Avery without sound. Patrons leaned to captions. A man lifted a glass. Others nodded. Sometimes, film is justice catching up to time. A producer hustled. The floor manager flashed signals. Someone laughed, that quick laugh of relief and shock. I returned to the bench and watched the last frame freeze on Richard's profile. Rigid lips parted, the look of a man learning silence can be both answer and verdict. Credits rolled. The room exhaled. Avery came, no triumph, just work done. You okay, steady? He's been subpoenaed, wider scope. She nodded. Time. We stood a moment, 2 women in a building that moved a statue by showing its cracks. My phone buzzed. Serena Neighbors switched mid-game. Ortega. I kept that tape because someone had to. I typed, thank you, erased it, typed again, sent. At the elevator, my reflection looked older than morning. Doors opened with a soft chime. The hall breathed ink. Bennett stepped out, coat unbuttoned, eyes bright with document light. He didn't need words. He pressed something into my hand, paperweight, sure, corner sharp. Bennett hands me an envelope inside Eleanor's hidden letter. If he wins, you must rewrite the story. They said I was just a secretary in uniform today. The nation knows me by rank. Flags drifted across Arlington. May light, disciplined. Colonel Evans touched my elbow, then stepped back. Cadets lined the aisle, faces fierce. When my name was called, applause came steady. I set my palms on the wood. Quiet service shapes nations even when no one claps. The field breathed. I spoke of quiet logistics, windowless signatures, letters that carry wars away. I did not say my father's name. I told them about Eleanor, how a woman holds a house, how grief learns to walk. I said her name. Nurses nodded. Section 60 drew my eye. I remembered the folded flag. The mic caught my breath. The audience let me have it. Yara stood at the end, steady. Serena stood beside her phone, pocketed hands clasped. I closed with what stays, invisible service counts. History belongs to keepers of receipts. When I stepped back, taps braided silence. Afterward, the crowd moved gently, as if noise could nick stone. A girl in a black dress approached. Claire Thorne Marcus's daughter. She offered a photo and an envelope. You're who I want to be, she said. The photo showed me at 13 in an oversized coat. Salute too big, grin bigger. On the back, cramped handwriting, don't forget the way back. Dad says the uniform changes people, she added. I think it shows them. It shows what was already there, I said. I slid the photo into my pocket and pressed a program into her hands. Write your own orders. Evans's tap and Yara's nod told Claire what mattered, witnesses. Claire lingered in the aisle until her cadet friends tugged her sleeve, then she looked back once and smiled like a pledge. The breeze lifted the programs and set them down again. A bugle tested a note and found it true. By afternoon, I reached the Pentagon. My office smelled of cardboard and paint, the window borrowing a slice of sky. On the shelf, I set three things: the insignia pin, the folded flag with my name, a photo of Eleanor. The room felt like a beginning that remembered everything. The pin caught light and threw it back. I opened the envelope Bennett gave me. Eleanor's letter waited in her hand and ink. I reread, "If he wins, you must rewrite the story," and felt the knot loosen. I set the letter by the flag. Claire knocked and hovered with two cadets. They asked for 10. I gave 30. We talked roots into intelligence, the art of evidence, the power of one clean sentence. When they left, the office felt larger. I pinned the insignia beneath my name tag close enough to feel its chill. The frame caught my reflection. No child in an oversized coat, no officer pleading for entry, but an architect of her own halls. I leaned toward Eleanor's smile and filed the only report that mattered. He erased me. I wrote myself back. The words settled. Outside, the river kept its slow parade. Inside, the phone chimed, then held its breath. I straightened briefing, slid Claire's photo into the drawer, and touched the flag with two fingers. A shadow crossed Evans, then withdrew, leaving the door ajar the way mentors do. Sun found the pin and crowned it with light. Footsteps gathered in the corridor, purpose collecting. I turned, squared my shoulders, and reached for the folder stamped Legacy Forward. Pentagon Bulletin announces Director Nadine Thorne appointed to lead Legacy Forward program. Thank you for walking with me. If my story moved you, I ask, please tell me what you felt, what you questioned, and what you would have done. Leave a comment for me. Counsel matters. Share a moment you reclaimed your name or a time you kept receipts and truth prevailed. My advice: trust steady work, document everything. Choose allies, set boundaries, and speak when evidence is ready. Honor quiet service but refuse erasure. Breathe, stand tall, and write your own orders. Pin your values where you can see them. When someone tries to edit, you revise the ending yourself.